And we are here at OSHEAN Cybersecurity Day. It is still a beautiful view the back of those windows. I'm here with Brian Lamoureux. He's an attorney. That's what it says in your card. You're an attorney. Brian, welcome.
Thank you, Paul.
Now, Brian, you're talking about, when we were just chatting before we started, is that there are parallels from the tobacco industry in terms of marketing and social media. And is that in the way that they're trying to entice children? Is that...
It's partially that, Paul. What I've been studying over the years is how the big tech, big data, social media companies have been marketing in ways which are not new. It's been around forever, right? The Las Vegas was built on marketing and dopamine.
Yep.
And I also have a history and an understanding of how tobacco is marketed based upon some of my work years ago. And as I started to think about how big tech is marketing and growing itself, I started to see parallels, whether it be targeting towards children, whether making things more socially acceptable and to increase use, whether, if, for example, executives use the product. I have quotes from R.J. Reynolds tobacco executives from years ago that say, we would never smoke that stuff. Well, in 2011, Steve Jobs said when the iPad launched, I don't let my kids use these devices.
Interesting.
There's a parallel there.
Yeah.
So I've been starting to study that more and more.
No, I think that's fascinating. And I see lots of, as you were speaking, can draw lots of parallels to that. And I think e-cigarettes are a big issue today. I think it has taken the heat off some of the other areas of tobacco, right? Because we're using the term tobacco kind of as an all-encompassing term.
Sure.
But, we have a podcast in the cigar industry, right? And so I've looked at all the different tobacco industries, and they're all very different. And when e-cigarettes started to come around, it was really a technology nerdy thing in the beginning, just to get these things to work so they didn't blow up. And so we used them a long time ago in security because it was a nerdy thing to do. As that tech evolved, though, are they marketing towards children? Do you see parallels with the e-cigarettes as well?
Yeah, so I'm not a big study on the e-cigarettes, but what I have seen, though, is certainly the government is paying much more attention towards how aggressively the lighter types of tobacco, such as the e-cigs or those, are being used. So I think it's too early to tell to see where that's going to shake out.
Yep.
One thing I did catch in the last few months was the FTC has come down very hard on advertising that's not disclosed for these alternative products. So government, I think, is trying to make sure we don't repeat ourselves with tobacco. So I think it's not more on the radar. And from the big tech side and from the social media side, I think it's just more of the Wild West. I don't think government's paying attention.
There's no regulation. I mean, that's where I was going next.
No.
When we talk about tobacco, lots of regulation.
Sure.
Social media and advertising, there's
Wild
no
West.
Facebook and whoever can advertise wherever they want, which is ironic because if I want to advertise tobacco on Facebook, they don't let me.
Right, because they control that market.
Yeah.
And, we started to see the crack last summer with the testimony in Congress, and I think Congress is starting to wake up and pay attention. And I don't believe Congress or any regulatory body is the answer. I think it's more complex than that. But, for example, let's use taxes. Well, tobacco is one of the most heavily taxed products in the history of the world. And there's strong public policy arguments as to why that should be the case. I'm also seeing noises being made about, well, we need to tax these tech companies because they have our data and they're using our data. So we need to pass laws or we need to find a way to tax them for that. There are those parallels that are happening. But I don't think we're anywhere near anything regulatory that's going to impact these markets on the social or digital media side at all. It either has to come from the companies themselves, it has to come from the users, and I'm skeptical that those two groups are going to do anything meaningful on privacy either. GDPR in Europe has started to come over. We might start to see more of that, but it's still way too early.
And well, what's nice about GDPR is I can actually download all my data now from all these places, which I actually like as a consumer. I like to, I actually deactivated my Facebook account, and before I did that, I downloaded all my data. But now one of the reasons that I deactivated Facebook was because of that dopamine effect that you mentioned earlier with Las Vegas, right? You always are checking your feed, and there's a certain parallel, I think, to gaming and maybe even tobacco and social media that it's fulfilling to see in like what's next because you don't know what's next, right?
Yeah, and there's a great book called The Weapons of Math Destruction, which is about the algorithms used to get us to use these devices more and more.
Yeah.
Facebook, when they started their like button or their like system and their notifications, the notifications were in blue. Blue's not a good notification. They're now red.
You're right.
They recognize that red has more of that impact. When you go to your Twitter feed and you refresh and you swipe down and then you see the spinning wheel and then something pops up.
Yeah.
It's a slot machine. That's a slot machine.
I know, because I love it when it does that. I'm like, oh, I've got new things to read. This is exciting.
And what's even more insidious is that the algorithm is designed in such a way that you don't get new things all the time. Sometimes you swipe and don't get anything.
Right.
Like a slot machine.
Because they have to balance.
They want you to lose and go, what? There's nothing new for me to see. Let me try again. It is
interesting.
It is unbelievably brilliant. And I'm just trying to sound the alarm to make sure that we as consumers go into that relationship knowing we're being, quote, used. Because I don't think a lot of people do.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand that you're the product of these social media companies.
Yeah, I mean, I think people get it because I uploaded my data and they're going to sell it. I kind of get that. But why it is I'm scrolling endlessly on Reddit, because they've now created the system that it's an endless pool as opposed to having to click on page by page.
Right.
Because they've learned clicking page by page, that's called friction. Friction makes you navigate away. So now Reddit and Twitter, you notice why you can scroll and scroll and scroll?
Is that also why Reddit pushes you to use their app?
Yes, because they once you're in the app, that you're less likely to get out. It's brilliant.
I always wondered why they would always push to use there seemed to be one of the only major ones that are doing that. And
I don't use the Reddit app, so it might be they might get more advertising revenue if they can show things on the proprietary platform as opposed to something else. But I know that model of trying to get those eyeballs there and keep them there is critical.
Those are some awesome parallels, Brian. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Paul.